welcome to the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. I'm your host, Jake McDonald. As always, for all Orioles coverage and Baltimore sports coverage this summer, you can check us out at charmcitybirdwatch.com, and be sure also to check out our various social media platforms, facebook.com/charmcitybirdwatch, Charm City Birdwatch on Instagram, and Twitter as CharmCityBW. Now, one thing I wanted to mention before we get this podcast started is we are looking for some help this summer, specifically with our Orioles coverage, but we are looking for writers who are interested in general in covering Baltimore sports as well. I put a little tweet out, sent out a post on Instagram as well, so if you haven't followed all of our social media accounts, please do so. And if you have any interest whatsoever as, stuff to put on your resume in the future or just a hobby for fun, if you're interested in covering Baltimore sports, please send your information, your resume, and your writing experience to charmcitybirdwatch@gmail.com. And as we look for help with our Orioles coverage this summer, if you have an interest, please let us know, and we will take a look and see if you fit the bill. Once again, you can follow me on Twitter at jmcdonald95 and facebook.com/jmcdonald95 for my social media platforms as well. All right, want to welcome in Rich Dubroff into the podcast now, covers the Orioles for PressBox Online. Follow him on Twitter at
PressBoxOnline.com.
Yes, PressBoxOnline.com. You can also follow him on Twitter at Rich Dubroff MLB. So another tough one last night, Rich, and I want to get your opinion on Ubaldo and when they're going to pull the plug on him, because it certainly seems like it could be looming here pretty soon.
Well, they certainly have an interesting decision to make with Ubaldo, whether they're going to keep him in the rotation, skip a start, send him to the bullpen, or just cut ties with him. It's going to be fascinating to see which decision they make with him.
And the Orioles, of course, their pitching staff in general has given up a lot of blown leads since April 28th that have been of 5 runs or more. How concerned are you with not just Ubaldo, but the entire pitching staff in general? Of course, with Zach Britton, it's been a struggle, and now the bullpen has had to work more than they would like to. And it's not just Ubaldo; they've got other problems with Gausman and Miley not going deep in games. Tillman's just coming off the DL, trying to get his stuff back. So it's really the entire pitching staff is kind of a little bit of a concern right now for the team.
Right, you are. I think that I think that's the most important issue: getting the starters to go deep in games. Tillman looked a little better in his last start. Gausman obviously has been in and out. There've been some good starts and some starts that have been not so good. And Miley's last start was actually pretty good. 3 unearned runs. He made one mistake, but he got the team deep into the game. So that's certainly been an issue. Dylan Bundy is for the most part has been really, really good and been their best starter, but they're going to need at least 3 good starters. To me, Tillman, Gausman, and Bundy have to pitch well for the Orioles to really be a serious contender the rest of the way.
Now, if they do kick Ubaldo out of the rotation, we all know about Ubaldo being, a top-notch guy, first-class guy and everything. But in the case they do, let him go, who do you see emerging into the rotation to take his spot?
Well, I think the guy that they might look at is Alec Asher, but he's pitched very, very well in the bullpen too. But Asher, could be a good starter for them, and they're considering him as a starter in the future. Another guy who they just sent down to the minors after he'd been on the DL is Gabriel Ynoa. He pitched 6 scoreless innings a couple of weeks ago in relief of Wade Miley, and he's somebody who they certainly might look at. It may be getting toward the time where Christopher Lee is a consideration. They want to leave him alone in the minors for a while, and of course Jason Aquino, who's been up. So there are several choices, and not necessarily bad ones. So it's going to be interesting to see which path they take and how soon they take it.
Any concern with Manny Machado? He's batting just .223 over the quarter pole. of the season. Of course, he had the X-ray on his hand, which came back clean, but he's taken a little bit longer to heat up than he usually has in recent previous seasons.
Well, it's interesting because last year he got off to a terrific start. He was the player of the month in April, and this year, it's been not as good. I mean, his fielding has been certainly up to par, but the bat really hasn't. And he keeps saying, well, he's got a track record. He's good. He's gonna keep on doing it. And people can say also, oh, it's the WBC. Well, Wellington Castillo played in the WBC, and Adam Jones played in the WBC, and they certainly don't seem to be, feeling the effects offensively.
Any word on Hyun-Soo Kim? He hasn't really gotten a lot of playing time with guys like Seth Smith and Joey Rickard and the emergence of Trey Mancini as well in the outfield. Do you think they could be looking at him as trade bait midway for the season? Well,
I think they certainly could. It was also when Craig Gentry was there, that also played a role in Hyun-Soo Kim. But I think that I don't know how much he could bring in return. He's a pretty limited player. I think he would be better off in a National League where he can pinch hit, because I think he could be a really good pinch hitter. And as for playing the American League, well, he doesn't have a lot of power. He doesn't. He's an average outfielder at best. His arm isn't there. Not a lot of speed. And if teams want a contact hitter, I think he's more of a complementary kind of player. He hasn't been bad. He certainly was good last year. And for people who were saying, oh, well, the Orioles should play him more, well, last year at this point in the season, he had played a lot less than he's played this year, and he hit much better last year. So it's going to be interesting, to see what they do with him.
We have Rich Dubroff here from Pressbox Online on the Charm City Birdwatch podcast. Any word on J.J. Hardy? I know some fans have kind of bashed on him, being a little bit of an older player. He's hitting just 203 this season, but I think it's kind of expected with an aging player. Of course, he's been kind of beat up. Is J.J. beat up here lately?
He's almost 35.
Mm-hmm.
Look around baseball. He's going to be 35 in August. How many shortstops who are 34 and 35 do you see? I mean, Derek Jeter, of course, played well past that, but he was a special case. Hardy's fielding certainly seems to be fine. His his bat is obviously not what it was. And a few of us were talking last night, and for your older Orioles fans in the audience, the Orioles had a shortstop who played in the 70s and early 80s named Mark Belanger, and Mark Belanger was just a terrific fielder, and he was not a great hitter at all. And we were sort of talking, well, could Mark Belanger, as good as he was, play today with the with the kind of skill set that he had, or is he just like Paul Janisch? And the feeling is, it would be hard to have a guy who just fields well and doesn't hit a lot playing shortstop. But I think Hardy right now is sort of the least of their problems. Once they get there, I think getting the starting pitching on track is a much greater concern. But they'd certainly like to have better production from Hardy.
Yeah, I think we kind of all expected with aging players the average to go down, but really, a lot of people have been ripping on him, and I think he's still made a bunch of top-notch plays on defense. Yes, there have been blunders here and there. Everybody has those over the course of the season, but really, I think he's more than enough of a serviceable shortstop at this point of his career. Adam Jones last night made history with his 125th home run, the most ever. at Camden Yards, all 125 of those coming. Just Adam now being a veteran player, going to be entering the final year of his deal next year, which we all don't know, what the future holds there. But just the impact that he's had, on the field, in the locker room, and off the field. I mean, the Orioles really have a gold standard there with Jones, and just everything that he's done for the organization really speaks hand in hand to the type of person he is.
Well, he's got 125 home runs there, and it's interesting because Chris Davis may pass him. Chris Davis has 114 at home runs there. So that's certainly a record that he may not hold on for very long. And and as you say, who knows what happens for him in 2019 and beyond. But one of the most interesting things I've found is, during Jones's time, during his prominence, the number of African American fans attending Orioles games has really, really increased. If you look around the stadium now, you see lots and lots of families, especially on the weekends, lots and lots of families all wearing Jones jersey. And before he came, or in his early years before he became prominent, there weren't very many African Americans who came to Oriole games, and he is certainly connected with a vital sector of the Orioles fan base, and he's a great crossover star. He's somebody that everybody is comfortable with, and we all know about his charitable work. I've certainly covered a number of events with Adam in his community service. So I think he has been a very, very valuable Oriole on the field, and a very, very valuable asset to the organization off the field.
Rich, if you had to kind of predict a little bit going forward here, of course, Manny will be entering the final year of his initial contract next year. Do you think they're going to eventually start talking to him about an extension, or do you think a possible trade scenario might be likely next season to try to maybe rebuild the farm system a little bit? What do you think is the most likely scenario with Machado here?
Well, it's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to, it's going to be very difficult to re-sign him. I think they will try to, re-sign him. The problem is with a market this size and the money that he could command, do they really want, even as valuable and as terrific as he is, do they want to spend, that large of a percentage on one player? Do they want, perhaps, 20 or 25% of their payroll going to one player? And that's going to be hard. And Zach Britton is also going to come up, and as you mentioned, Adam Jones. So there are going to be a lot of interesting decisions. If next July the Orioles are not in the race, if they're not competitive, and they don't think they have a chance to sign him, then they can look at that then. But certainly not before then. And there's certainly there's certainly not necessarily a bad thing about keeping a player for the whole way, because then they can, even though they may not get anything seemingly in return, they're getting great performance on the field. They didn't get anything necessarily for Matt Wieters or Nick Markakis, but in their final years, the Orioles made the postseason because they hung on to them. So, people just say, oh, well, they won't get anything for them. Well, they're getting excellent productions for them. But again, if they're, let's say, July 2018, they're not competitive, then they would, I think, absolutely look to see what's out there.
The Orioles right now are entering a pretty tough part of their schedule with two more games in this homestand against the first-place Twins. Then they hit the road for a 3-game set against the Astros, who right now have the best record, or as of yesterday, had the best record in baseball. And then coming back home for some homestand action against the Yankees and the Red Sox, who, of course, two formidable division opponents there. Where do you expect them to finish in terms of the division? Can they compete with the likes of the Astros and the Twins? And we all know what they're capable of against the Yankees and Red Sox. But when it's all said and done, where do you stand on them being able to compete against the top teams in the American League?
Well, if the starting pitching is good, they will be able to compete. If the starting pitching is not so good, they will not likely be able to repeat. Because you're not consistently going to be able to outslug people as they did. I mean, last night they scored 7 runs in a game, and they lost by 7. And they lost one game in New York where they scored 11 runs. They lost a game in Kansas City a couple of weeks ago when they scored 8 runs. And then last week in Detroit, they won a game where they gave up 11. So, I mean, it's certainly hard to predict, but over the long haul, you're not gonna win a lot of games if you don't have great starting pitching.
Rich Dubroff again for PressBoxOnline.com. Follow him on Twitter at Rich Dubroff MLB and all of his work at PressBoxOnline.com. Rich, thanks again for calling into the Charm City Birdwatch podcast again, and really do appreciate it. And best of luck, covering the Orioles the rest of the homestand and hitting the road for Houston.
Well, actually, I'll be actually off this weekend. My first weekend off of the season. I'll have to leave Houston to some of my friends. Happy Memorial Day to you and all your listeners.